Lieutenant Mark Harris arrived at the Galactic Training Academy with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The Academy was not just any institution, it was the pinnacle of intergalactic cooperation, a place where the best minds and bodies of the known universe came together to prepare for challenges that transcended planetary boundaries. For Mark, it was a chance to represent humanity on a grand stage, though he knew that many of his peers would not see him as an equal. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere of the Academy's host planet, he gazed out of the window at the sprawling complex below. Built into the surface of a rugged, mineral-rich world, the Academy's domed structures shimmered like jewels under the planet's twin suns. It was a testament to advanced engineering and diplomacy, a place where species of every imaginable shape and size trained together. The moment Mark stepped off the shuttle and into the central courtyard, the alien cadets' reactions were immediate. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some openly stared, their eyes scanning his slender frame, while others exchanged smirks and suppressed laughter. Towering beings with rippling musculature, covered in scales, fur, or chitin dwarfed him. Each species had evolved in unique conditions, and their physical forms reflected the harsh realities of their home planets. Mark, by comparison, looked ordinary, small, unassuming, and distinctly fragile. He adjusted the straps of his duffel bag and walked through the throng, his expression neutral. He had been warned this might happen. Humans, despite their growing presence in interstellar politics, were still seen by many as weaklings. Mark knew better than to react to their scorn. Instead, he focused on the path ahead, taking in his surroundings. The Academy's architecture was a fusion of styles, each influenced by the cultures of its participants. The floors shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that changed as beings stepped on them, creating a dynamic mosaic of light. Walls pulsed gently with organic energy, and the air carried the faint hum of advanced machinery interwoven with the planet's natural resources. It wasn't long before the other cadets' murmurs grew louder, emboldened by his silence. A group of Thorians, the Academy's most physically imposing recruits, moved closer, their heavy footsteps reverberating through the courtyard. Commander Zoreth, their leader, stood at the head of the group. Thorians were known for their size, strength, and competitive nature, and Zoreth embodied those traits perfectly. He was a towering figure, his skin a deep shade of copper, with ridges along his arms that glowed faintly in the sunlight. His voice boomed as he addressed the gathering cadets. "Cadets, welcome to the Galactic Training Academy," Zoreth began, his gaze sweeping across the crowd before settling on Mark. His lips curled into a grin, exposing sharp, metallic teeth. "It seems we have a representative from Earth among us. A human. I've heard they're delicate creatures." The cadets erupted into laughter, some mimicking exaggerated, stumbling movements as if mocking Mark's perceived frailty. Mark stood his ground, his posture straight, his expression unchanging. Zoreth took a step closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over Mark. "Tell me, Earthling," Zoreth continued, his tone dripping with mockery. "How do you expect to survive here when the wind from our running drills might knock you over?" Mark met the commander's gaze, his voice steady but firm. "I'll survive the same way I always have, by adapting." The laughter faltered slightly, and Zoreth's grin tightened into something less amused. "Adapting, you say? We'll see about that." The group dispersed, but not before a few cadets muttered insults under their breath. Mark ignored them, focusing on finding his quarters. As he navigated the Academy, his mind replayed the encounter. He had prepared for the Academy by studying not just its rigorous curriculum, but also the diverse cultures and physical attributes of its attendees. Mark knew that humans, with their relatively modest physiques, would always be underestimated. But he also knew something the others didn't. Human resilience wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, and adaptive, a product of thriving on a planet with unpredictable challenges. His quarters were modest, a small room with a sleeping pod, a holographic terminal, and a storage unit. After unpacking, he reviewed the schedule for the first day of training. The physical assessment was set for the afternoon, and Mark knew it would be his first real test. The Academy's assessments were notoriously grueling, designed to push cadets to their limits. For Mark, it would also be a test of perception he needed to prove, not just to himself but to the others, that humans belonged here. When the time for the assessment arrived, Mark joined the other cadets on the training grounds. The area was vast, with uneven terrain that mimicked the surface of a hostile planet. Glowing markers outlined the course, and massive crates of supplies were stacked near the starting line. Each crate weighed 300 kilograms, and the objective was to carry one across the terrain to a designated endpoint. It was a test of pure strength and endurance, and Mark could feel the weight of the cadets' skeptical gazes as they lined up. Commander Zorath strode to the front, his presence commanding attention. "This exercise is designed to separate the strong from the weak," he announced. "If you can't carry your weight literally, you don't belong here." One by one, the cadets began the exercise. The Thorians went first, lifting the crates with ease and striding confidently across the terrain. Other species followed, each displaying their unique strengths. Some relied on sheer power, while others used natural adaptations like additional limbs or specialized appendages to navigate the course. The crowd cheered as each cadet completed the task, their movements celebrated as feats of natural superiority. When it was Mark's turn, the laughter began again. A Grelkin cadet, whose exoskeleton shimmered in the light, sneered, "Careful, human. Don't let it crush you." Mark stepped forward, ignoring the jeers. He gripped the edges of the crate, positioning himself carefully. Years of training had taught him to focus not on the noise but on the task. He inhaled deeply, engaging the strength in his legs and core. Slowly, the crate began to rise. The crowd fell silent, their mockery replaced with disbelief. Mark didn't just lift the crate, he carried it with a steady, deliberate pace. His movements were efficient, calculated, and almost graceful. The uneven terrain posed a challenge, but he adapted with each step, his body compensating for the shifts and inclines. As he approached the endpoint, a ripple of murmurs spread through the onlookers. Some of the alien cadets exchanged wide-eyed glances, while others stood frozen, their jaws slack. Zorath, who had been watching intently, narrowed his eyes. His expression was unreadable, a mix of curiosity and something that might have been respect. Mark placed the crate down at the endpoint, his breathing heavy but controlled. He straightened, meeting the stunned gazes of his peers. Without a word, he returned to the lineup, his expression calm despite the effort he had just exerted. The crowd remained silent, their previous confidence shaken. Zorath stepped forward, his booming voice breaking the silence. "Impressive," he said, his tone devoid of mockery. "It seems Earthlings have more to offer than we thought." Mark didn't respond. He didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. As the suns climbed higher in the sky, bathing the Galactic Training Academy's rugged terrain in a harsh, unyielding light, Mark Harris prepared for what was shaping up to be another grueling day. The physical test the day before had shifted the balance of perception at least slightly. Though many cadets still harbored doubts, whispers of his feat had spread throughout the academy. For the first time, Mark noticed curious glances mixed with the usual derision. It wasn't open respect, not yet, but it was a crack in the armor of prejudice. The morning began with a general assembly in the central atrium, where the cadets gathered beneath a towering holographic display that listed the day's objectives. Mark stood to one side, partially hidden by the shadow of a massive Euthrilian cadet, a creature with translucent, jelly-like skin that shimmered as it moved. Despite his effort to stay inconspicuous, he could feel Commander Zorath's gaze sweep over the crowd, lingering on him for just a moment too long. It was a subtle acknowledgement, one that carried both challenge and intrigue. The first task of the day was a team-based endurance drill, designed not only to test physical stamina but also to evaluate the cadets' ability to work together under pressure. Teams of 6 were assigned at random, a decision that, as Zorath explained with a pointed smirk, was meant to simulate the unpredictability of intergalactic missions. Mark found himself grouped with an eclectic mix of species, a hulking Thorian named Greltok, who grunted disapproval at the assignment, a skittering insectoid Rylithian who introduced herself as Tris-Ki, a silent, shadowy Zircon whose features seemed to blur when not directly observed, a serpentine Selkari named Varesh, whose coils constantly shifted with restless energy, and a diminutive, wide-eyed Trelvan named Porin, who looked even smaller than Mark. "Great," Greltok muttered, crossing his massive arms. "A human and a Trelvan. Might as well call this team dead weight." Mark didn't respond, though his jaw tightened. He turned his attention to the task at hand, a sprawling obstacle course that spanned the Academy's training grounds. It was a brutal circuit of towering walls, electrified barriers, and simulated environmental hazards, all designed to push the cadets to their limits. The goal was simple: navigate the course as a unit, ensuring every team member reached the endpoint within the allotted time. Failure to do so meant disqualification, not just for the day, but from the Academy entirely. As Zoreth's voice boomed over the field, signaling the start of the drill, Mark felt the weight of the task settle on his shoulders. The team dynamic was fractured from the outset. Greltok, brimming with arrogance, took it upon himself to lead, barking orders that were met with varying degrees of compliance. Tris-Ki scuttled ahead, her many legs providing her with remarkable agility, but she ignored the rest of the group entirely. Varesh slithered through obstacles with serpentine grace, contributing little to the team effort, while Porin struggled to keep up, her small frame no match for the demanding course. Mark observed in silence, choosing his moment carefully. It came when they reached a towering wall of sheer metal, its surface slick with condensation from the Academy's atmospheric generators. Greltok attempted to scale it alone, his brute strength failing him as he slipped repeatedly. Tris-Ki made it halfway before losing her grip, while Varesh simply coiled at the base, waiting for someone else to solve the problem. Porin stared up at the wall, her expression a mix of determination and despair. Mark stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're not going to get anywhere unless we work together." Greltok turned, his nostrils flaring. "And what exactly do you suggest, human?" "Leverage," Mark replied. "We build a chain. Greltok, you're the strongest, you anchor us at the bottom. Tris-Ki, your legs can hold the middle. Varesh and I can boost Porin to the top, and she can secure the line for the rest of us." Greltok hesitated, his pride warring with the logic of the plan. Finally, with a grudging nod, he moved into position. The team began to work, each member contributing their unique abilities. It wasn't seamless. Tris-Ki complained about her placement, and Varesh's coils slipped more than once, but slowly, progress was made. When Porin reached the top and secured the line, a cheer erupted from the group, surprising even Greltok. The rest of the course was no less challenging. They faced narrow tunnels filled with simulated acid vapors, forcing the team to crawl on their bellies, and shifting platforms that required precise timing and coordination. Mark found himself taking on the role of mediator, his calm demeanor diffusing tension and his strategic thinking compensating for the group's lack of cohesion. By the time they reached the final obstacle, a wide chasm spanned only by a series of unstable, levitating discs, the team was functioning, if not smoothly, then at least effectively. It was Porin who saved them at the chasm. Her small size and agility allowed her to dart across the discs, activating stabilizers that made the path safe for the others. When the entire team reached the endpoint, exhausted but intact, Zoreth was waiting. His expression was inscrutable as he scanned the group, his gaze lingering on Mark once more. "Acceptable performance," he said, his tone clipped. "Though I suspect the human had more to do with your success than some of you would care to admit." Greltok bristled but said nothing. Tris-Ki clicked her mandibles in a gesture that might have been agreement, while Porin gave Mark a shy smile. Varesh simply coiled tighter, his golden eyes unreadable. As the day continued, Mark found himself reflecting on the exercise. It wasn't just a test of physical endurance, it was a microcosm of what the Academy represented. The ability to overcome differences, to find strength in diversity, was at the heart of intergalactic cooperation. For Mark, it was a lesson as much as it was a victory. A reminder that he had as much to learn from his peers as they had to learn from him. By the time evening fell, the training grounds were quiet, the cadets dispersed to their quarters. Mark stood alone at the edge of the field, gazing out at the alien sky. The twin suns had set, replaced by a sprawling expanse of stars, each one a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the challenges that lay ahead. He knew that respect wouldn't come easily, not in a place where strength was often measured in brute force. But he also knew that he had taken the first step, not just for himself, but for humanity. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of Zorath watching him from a distance. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was no mockery in the commander's gaze, only curiosity, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of respect. Mark held the gaze for a moment before nodding and walking away, his resolve stronger than ever. The sun's twin orbs bathed the Galactic Training Academy in a relentless glow as the cadets gathered for their most anticipated challenge yet, the combat simulation drill. It was the Academy's ultimate test of strategy, endurance, and adaptability, a simulated battlefield designed to mimic real intergalactic conflict scenarios. For many cadets, this was the moment they had been preparing for their entire lives, the culmination of their training, and the test that would determine their fitness to remain in the Academy. For Mark Harris, it was another opportunity to prove that humans were more than what others assumed. The drill was held in a colossal biodome that stretched as far as the eye could see, its artificial environment meticulously programmed to replicate a hostile alien terrain. Jagged cliffs loomed overhead, rivers of molten lava carved through the ground, and the air shimmered with an oppressive heat. The cadets were divided into teams once again, but this time the stakes were higher. Teams would compete against one another to secure a central beacon, while fending off waves of robotic adversaries programmed with advanced AI. Only the team that activated the beacon and defended it for 10 minutes would pass the drill. Mark found himself standing with his new team at the edge of the battlefield, surveying the simulated chaos that lay ahead. This time, his teammates included Varesh, the serpentine Selkari from the previous challenge, as well as two others: Kroll, a brutish Rovan whose body was covered in armored plates, and Nissa, a lithe Erythian with luminescent blue skin and sharp, calculating eyes. Greltok, the Thorian who had begrudgingly worked with Mark before, had been assigned to another team. As they awaited the start signal, the tension among them was palpable. "This isn't going to be like the obstacle course," Kroll growled, his voice a low rumble. "If you can't keep up, human, stay out of the way." Mark ignored the jab, focusing instead on the terrain ahead. He knew better than to waste energy defending himself with words. His strength would lie in action. Nissa, who had been scanning the environment with her enhanced vision, spoke up. "The central beacon is likely on top of that cliff," she said, pointing to a towering rock formation in the distance. "But the path is exposed. If we don't move strategically, we'll be easy targets for the drones." Varesh coiled beside her, his golden eyes narrowing. "Then we need to split up. Kroll can take the lead as a shield. I'll flank from the riverbed. Nissa and the human can cover from behind." Mark raised an eyebrow at the division of roles. "We'll need better coordination than that," he said. "The drones won't just come at us from one direction. We need to anticipate their movements and create a fallback plan if we're outnumbered." Kroll snorted. "Fallback plans are for the weak." Before Mark could respond, the signal blared, and the drill began. The dome erupted into chaos as teams scrambled into the battlefield, their movements tracked by the watchful eyes of Commander Zorath and his cadre of instructors. Mark's team surged forward, with Kroll charging ahead like a battering ram, his armored bulk smashing through obstacles with little regard for stealth. The drones appeared moments later, sleek, insect-like machines with razor-sharp appendages and glowing red eyes. They descended in swarms, their movements fast and precise, Kroll's brute force proved effective initially, as he smashed through the first wave of drones with his armored fists. But as the team pushed closer to the beacon, the drones began to adapt, targeting their weaknesses with uncanny precision. Varish's speed allowed him to evade attacks, but his lack of direct combat abilities left him struggling to contribute. Nissa's agility and sharpshooting skills were impressive, but she couldn't cover all angles at once. And Kroll, for all his strength, began to tire as the relentless assault continued. Mark, meanwhile, observed the unfolding battle with a critical eye. He noticed patterns in the drones' movements, subtle shifts in their formation that hinted at their AI's priorities. They targeted the strongest first, then moved to isolate and overwhelm the weakest. It was a calculated strategy, one that required a calculated response. Nissa, aim for the drones on Kroll's left. Mark shouted, his voice cutting through the din. Varish, use the terrain to funnel them toward the cliffs. We'll bottleneck them and take them out in smaller groups. To his surprise, they listened. Nissa shifted her position, her plasma rifle cutting through the drones with precision, while Varish darted along the riverbed, his movements drawing the swarm into a narrower pathway. Mark positioned himself behind Kroll, using the Rovin's bulk as cover while targeting drones with his compact blaster. Together, they began to turn the tide. As they neared the base of the cliff, the drones' attacks grew more aggressive. A larger unit emerged from the swarm, a towering machine with reinforced plating and multiple weapon systems. It unleashed a barrage of energy blasts that sent the team scrambling for cover. Kroll charged at the machine head-on, but even his armor couldn't withstand the assault. He was knocked back, his chest plate smoking from the impact. Mark reacted instinctively. Kroll, fall back. Nissa, hit the joints on its legs, it's vulnerable there. While Nissa fired precision shots at the towering drone's joints, Mark sprinted toward a cluster of debris nearby. He scavenged a length of reinforced cable and a broken energy core, his mind racing as he fashioned them into an improvised explosive device. Timing his movements with Nissa's shots, he darted under the drone, attaching the device to its undercarriage before rolling clear. "Everyone, get back," he shouted. The explosion rocked the battlefield, sending the towering drone crashing to the ground. The remaining drones faltered, their programming disrupted by the loss of their leader unit. It was the opening the team needed to reach the cliff and begin the climb toward the beacon. The ascent was treacherous. The cliff's surface was jagged and unstable, with loose rocks threatening to give way at any moment. Mark took the lead, guiding the team along the safest path he could find. Nissa followed closely, her movements nimble despite the strain. Varish used his coiled body to anchor himself, while Kroll brought up the rear, his usual bravado replaced with grudging respect for Mark's leadership. When they finally reached the beacon, the team had only moments to activate it before the drones regrouped. Mark worked quickly, bypassing the beacon's security protocols with the help of Nissa's advanced tech knowledge. The beacon flared to life, emitting a signal that temporarily disrupted the drone's AI. But the victory was short-lived. The drones began to recover, their swarms closing in from all directions. For 10 minutes, the team held their ground. They fought with everything they had, their earlier divisions forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Mark's strategic calls kept them one step ahead, while Nissa's precision, Varish's agility, and Kroll's brute force created a formidable defense. When the signal finally stabilized and the drill ended, the team stood victorious, battered but unbroken. As they descended from the cliff, the biodome's environment shifted back to its default state, the simulated battlefield dissolving into a sterile training ground. Commander Zorath awaited them at the base, his expression unreadable as he regarded the exhausted cadets. "Well done," he said, his voice grudging but firm. "You've proven that even the most unlikely teams can succeed when they work together. And you," he added, fixing his gaze on Mark, "have proven that humans are more than just survivors. You're strategists. Leaders." Mark met Zorath's gaze, his exhaustion giving way to a quiet pride. He didn't need the commander's validation to know he had earned his place here. But it was a step a crack in the barrier of prejudice, and a moment of recognition that humanity's strengths were not to be underestimated. As the cadets dispersed, Mark lingered for a moment, looking out at the now empty battlefield. The challenges ahead would only grow more difficult, but for the first time he felt a sense of belonging. He was not just an outsider trying to prove himself, he was part of something greater, a collective effort to bridge the gaps between worlds. And in that, he found purpose. The final test came with little warning, announced during the Academy's evening briefing as they gathered in the central atrium. Commander Zorath stood before them, his presence as imposing as ever, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of weakness. Behind him, a holographic display flickered to life, revealing a simulation of what appeared to be a massive asteroid field. Its jagged rocks and glowing energy anomalies filled the screen, creating a chaotic landscape that seemed impossible to navigate. "This," Zorath began, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the cadets, "is the final test of your training. It is not a simulation but a live mission. Beyond this academy lies an uncharted region of space where an ancient distress signal has been detected. Your task is to locate the source of the signal, assess any potential threats, and secure the area. This is not a drill. The risks are real, and failure is not an option." The room fell silent. The gravity of the mission was clear. The cadets were no longer simply students, they were being called upon to act as fully fledged members of the Intergalactic Alliance, tasked with a mission that could mean life or death. Mark felt his chest tighten as he absorbed the weight of Zorath's words. The Academy had pushed him to his limits, but this was something entirely different. This wasn't just about proving himself, it was about survival, about demonstrating that he had earned his place among beings who were stronger, faster, and often more experienced than he was. The cadets were divided into teams, each assigned a small reconnaissance vessel equipped with basic supplies and limited weaponry. Mark found himself once again paired with Nissa, Varish, and Kroll. Their earlier challenges had forged a tenuous bond, but the stakes of this mission added a new layer of tension. There was no room for error. As they boarded their ship, the Horizon Runner, Mark took a moment to familiarize himself with the controls. The vessel was sleek and compact, built for speed and agility rather than firepower. Its cockpit was dominated by a large central display, showing a real-time map of the asteroid field they were about to enter. Nissa took the pilot's seat, her nimble fingers dancing over the controls, while Varish coiled near the navigation console, his golden eyes scanning for anomalies. Kroll settled into the gunner's station, his armored bulk making the chair groan under his weight. Mark took the position of mission strategist, his mind racing as he analyzed the limited data they had. The distress signal was faint, originating from deep within the asteroid field. The surrounding area was rife with electromagnetic interference, making communication with the Academy impossible. They were on their own. The ship launched smoothly, its engines humming as it broke through the Academy's atmosphere and into the void of space. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a sprawling expanse of chaos and danger. Nissa guided the ship with precision, weaving through the debris with an almost preternatural sense of timing. But as they ventured deeper, the interference grew stronger, and the ship's systems began to falter. "We're losing navigational data," Varish reported, his voice calm but tense. "The interference is worse than expected." "Switch to manual navigation," Mark said, leaning over the console to assess the situation. "Varish, can you track the signal manually?" Varish nodded, his coils shifting as he adjusted the sensors. "It'll take longer, but I can isolate the source." The minutes stretched into an hour as they pushed deeper into the field, the tension in the cockpit thickening with every passing moment. The rocks grew larger, some spinning violently, their surfaces crackling with energy. Kroll muttered curses under his breath, his fingers tightening around the ship's weapon controls as smaller debris began to pelt their hull. Then, without warning, the distress signal intensified. A high-pitched wail filled the cockpit, accompanied by a sudden burst of static on the central display. Niss's hands flew over the controls, stabilizing the ship as it was rocked by an unseen force. "We're close," Varish said, his voice low. "The source is just ahead." As the Horizon Runner rounded a massive asteroid, the source of the signal came into view. It was a derelict vessel, ancient and alien, its design unlike anything Mark had ever seen. The ship was massive, its hull scarred and pitted from centuries of exposure to the harshness of space. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its surface, their meaning indecipherable. Nissa brought the ship to a halt, hovering at a safe distance. "What the hell is that?" she murmured, her usually steady voice tinged with awe. Before Mark could respond, the derelict ship emitted another burst of energy, this one stronger and more focused. The Horizon Runner's systems flickered, and the lights in the cockpit dimmed. "It's pulling us in," Kroll shouted, his voice rising in panic as the ship lurched forward. "Engage reverse thrusters," Mark ordered, his mind racing. "Nissa, can you stabilize us?" "I'm trying," she snapped, her hands gripping the controls. "Whatever that thing is, it's overriding our systems." The Horizon Runner was dragged inexorably closer to the derelict ship, its hull groaning under the strain. As they crossed the threshold of its gravitational field, the cockpit was flooded with an eerie, pulsating light. The ship's interior was unlike anything they had prepared for, its architecture defying conventional geometry. Strange, organic structures jutted from the walls, and the air seemed to hum with a low, resonant frequency. Mark's instincts screamed at him to retreat, but there was no turning back. The Horizon Runner came to a halt, suspended in the center of the alien ship's massive hangar. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. "We're not leaving until we find the source of the signal," Mark said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. "Suit up. We're going in." The team donned their environment suits, their helmets sealing with a faint hiss. As they stepped out of the ship and onto the hangar floor, the oppressive hum grew louder, resonating in their chests. The alien symbols along the walls glowed brighter, casting strange, shifting shadows. Varish led the way, his serpentine form gliding silently across the floor. Nissa followed, her weapon at the ready, while Kroll brought up the rear, his massive frame tense with unease. Mark stayed in the center, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The source of the signal was located in the heart of the ship, a cavernous chamber filled with a blinding, pulsating light. At its center stood a massive, crystalline structure, its facets refracting the light into a kaleidoscope of colors. Strange energy pulsed from its core, filling the air with a sense of palpable, almost sentient awareness. As the team approached, the light intensified, and a voice filled their minds, a voice that was not a voice, but a collection of emotions and memories, vast and incomprehensible. "You are the first," it said, its tone both welcoming and ominous. "The first to answer the call. Will you succeed where others have failed?" Mark stepped forward, his heart pounding. "What is this place?" he asked aloud, his voice echoing in the chamber. "This is a test," the voice replied. "A test of unity, of resilience. The fate of your kind and all others depends on your ability to work together." The light flared, and the chamber dissolved into chaos. The team found themselves in a simulation of their own memories and fears, forced to confront the fractures in their unity. Kroll's arrogance, Nissa's doubts, Varish's aloofness, all were laid bare. It was Mark who held them together, his unwavering belief in their potential forcing them to reconcile their differences. When the simulation ended, the team stood together, their bond stronger than ever. The crystalline structure dimmed, its energy dispersing as the ship released its hold on them. The voice spoke one final time, its tone filled with quiet satisfaction. "You have passed. Go forth, and remember unity is strength." The team returned to the Horizon Runner, their exhaustion giving way to a profound sense of accomplishment. As the ship left the derelict vessel and returned to the Academy, Mark felt a quiet pride settle over him. He had not only proven himself but had helped bridge the gap between species, showing that humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to unite. When they arrived, Zorath greeted them with a rare smile. "Well done," he said simply, his tone filled with genuine respect. "You've earned your place here." For the first time, Mark felt that he truly belonged not just as a representative of Earth, but as a vital part of something far greater. The Academy had tested him in every way, and he had emerged not only stronger but more connected to the galaxy and its infinite possibilities.